Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi everyone. I assume no one's got anything better to do on a Friday evening. The fact that you're out here, alhamdulillah. But may Allah bless you, first of all. I hope, inshallah, that we can do justice to this topic. And I'll go through it. But the idea of ethics and what it means today is something that's unfortunately often lost on the Muslim community. We either live a life of seeing things in black and white as halal or haram, and we don't delve into what could be deemed ethical or unethical. And inshallah, I want to cover both, hopefully, in the brief time that I have. Just as a brief introduction to myself, I'm the Chief Risk Officer for Wahid. I head up the risk compliance in Sharia. I'm a trustee for Cambridge Muslim College. I'm on the board of the UK Islamic Finance Council. So at the UK Islamic Finance Council, we work at government and supra-government level around Islamic finance. So one of the things I worked on was advising the UN on the alignment between Islamic finance and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm a trustee of the Muslim Legal Fund. I'm a co-founder of the National Waqf, alhamdulillah, who are doing an event tonight at Shiru Masjid down the road. And I'm also one of the specialist advisors to the Islamic Finance Advisory, which effectively works as a Majlis Shura on all things finance related when it comes to the Sharia. We're part of the Islamic Council, where we deal with wider issues pertaining to Muslims living life in the West. I have my postgraduate qualification from down the road, from Manchester Business School, alhamdulillah. And I also have a further qualification in risk from Harvard. My background is actually economics, and I've studied for a number of years under different scholars, primarily under Sheikh Haytham al-Haddad, hafidhullah, in the UK. So I want to start off with an icebreaker to get yourselves involved. Does anyone know what this is? Number one. And number two, what is its relationship to finance? So, does anyone know what this is on the screen? Put your hand up. Say your name. Adam? Is it the black stone? What do you guys think? Yes, okay. It is the black stone. Well done, mashallah. And what is its relationship to finance? The sin. This is a good one. This is one that most people say, that it became dark because of the sins of people. That is potentially an answer, but not the specific answer I'm looking for. What is the relationship between the black stone and finance? Does anyone know? How old it is? No? I'll give you guys a clue. Does everyone remember the story of when the Kaaba was rebuilt? Who knows? And what happened? What? Exactly. When the Kaaba was being rebuilt, and this is before the Prophet ﷺ even was declared a prophet, peace be upon him, the Kaaba was being rebuilt, and the whole story was who should place the black stone. But what's important about this is that the Kaaba itself, the mushrikeen, if you imagine the pagan Arabs at that point, who were steeped in idol worship, so they'd worship idols, they were involved in all types of sin, where they would bury their daughters alive, they would cheat, they would swear, they would gamble, they would drink. But even they knew that you could not build something pure on something that's impure. So they said that we won't use any money that's made from riba, we won't use any money that came from gambling or from alcohol or anything like this. We will only use pure income to rebuild the Kaaba. Now this is a really important point. If those mushrikeen, those idol worshippers who were involved in all forms of jahiliyyah understood this, then what about us today when it comes to building our businesses and our lives, when we base it upon sin? When we will take, without thinking about it, interest-based loans. When we build businesses taking riba-based loans and so on. We think nothing of how we treat our partners when it comes to business. Maybe we're willing to cheat them, we're willing to cut corners, etc. So this is really important. Now, it's really important to understand the ultimate aims of Islam as a whole, and it's important to understand where finance fits and business fits within the overall framework of understanding or of understanding Islam. So we know that the purpose of Islam is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal without any partner. And then Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that He orders us to justice and good conduct and giving to our relatives and forbids immorality and bad conduct and oppression. He admonishes us that perhaps we will be reminded. So there's certain other things we need to understand from our religion. So it's not just worshipping Allah, that's definitely a part of it, but it's also to establish justice. So we have to establish justice. And then going beyond justice. So when we think of adl, most people think of these are my rights. But Islam calls us to something higher than just rights. Now this isn't a lecture on marriage, for example, but any relationship that's based on just rights, you'll find that it has strain. But if you look at the command of Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Quran, He talks us and tells us to be better. He talks about generosity and karam and kindness. When we're told the verse, the ayah of nikah in the Quran, when we're told about marriage, Allah talks about having mawadda and rahmah. Allah doesn't say have adl in your marriage. He says have mawadda and rahmah. Have a love, a type of love that you show, and mercy. Allah's always telling us to be better. So it's not just adl, it's not just justice, but it's going beyond justice. And then forbidding all types of bad, evil, and indecent activities. Okay. Why is this topic important for us today, subhanAllah? The Prophet ﷺ told us seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. Umer ibn Khattab radiallahu anh told us, no one is allowed to trade in our market except for those who comprehend the religion. Otherwise, they will devour riba, whether they want to or not. And then Ali radiallahu anh tells us, whoever trades before understanding the religion, they would bump into riba, bump into it again and again. So I'll say these different examples here. Who's a businessman here or a businesswoman? Put your hand up. Okay. Who's ever bought anything online? Who's ever sold anything online? Okay, there's more hands. Do you know the rules of trading? You see? Some of us think that some of these rules are just for those people who are involved in business. The problem is today, all of us are involved, and it's so easy to transact just using these simple devices that we don't even consider it a transaction. We're surrounded by transactions happening all the time, especially now, even when we automate. When we have a direct debit going out, that's a transaction that's happening on our behalf. But how many of us understand the rulings? Right? Just as a base position, if I was to ask everyone, do they understand the ruling or the prohibition of riba? Everyone will say, riba is interest. Is it allowed or disallowed? Halal or haram? Haram, very clearly, yeah? Bank accounts, are they halal or haram? Allowed, but depends. Bank accounts, are they halal or haram by themselves? Guys aren't sure. Depends if you get interest. Okay, let me show you hands. All right, guys. No one's going to get an easy Friday, sorry. Bank accounts. What is the purpose of banks? What do banks do? They lend money at interest. That's how they make profit at space level. They lend money at interest. Are banks halal or haram? Don't be shy. If you think they're halal, put your hands up. One person thinks they're halal. If you think they're haram, put your hands up. Okay. Now look, this isn't the ruling on whether you can have a bank account, etc. Right now, it's just banks, the activity that they do, is it halal or haram? Is the activity of banks halal or haram? Haram, put your hands up. Okay. So by extension, any activity which supports the haram would be haram, right? But bid-darura, through necessity, scholars have allowed us to use bank accounts because you wouldn't be able to engage or live in society today otherwise, especially now we're really living in a cashless society. Like 5 years ago, it was only 3% of all money in circulation was cash. Now it's even less. But the base position is that it's impermissible. Insurance, halal or haram? Okay. Insurance, if you think it's halal, put your hands up. If you think insurance is haram, put your hands up. If you have a car and you drive it, put your hands up. Okay. Do you have insurance? You do, yeah? But it's haram. All right. Don't need to put your hands up for this one. When was the last time you made tawbah for having a financial product? See, this is the problem, and this is why it's important to understand these subjects, because we engage in financial transactions all the time without realizing the consequence of it. I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that having a bank account is something that you need. But the base position is that it's impermissible, but we've been allowed to engage with it. Insurance, it's impermissible. It contains something called gharar. It contains something called maisir, gambling, and it contains riba. Impermissible, but we've been allowed to use it through necessity. But the base position is haram, and if we understand that, we'd ask Allah to forgive us. But because we've moved away from it, and we live in a time where our financial sins are ones that we're not even shy of anymore, and as a society and a community, we accept them, it's become a problem, okay? Now and I'm going to come on to riba further, because I think it's so important that we cover it. But this is just to kind of open up for us. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, آمنوا بالله ورسوله وأنفقوا مما جعلكم مستخلفين فيه. Believe in Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and spend of that which He has made you trustees. This is really important for us to also understand the nature of our relationship with wealth. Allah is telling us that we have wealth and He's made us trustees of it. What is the role of a trustee? Can they do what they want? No. Even with the wealth that Allah Azza wa Jal has given us, it has a duty upon us, and we have a duty upon that money. We know that the son of Adam on Yawm al-Qiyamah, their feet will not move until they're asked certain questions. Imagine this, your feet will not move. We're standing in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. And of the questions that we're going to be asked, 2 of them are to do with your wealth. How you earned that money and how you spent that money. This is what it means, that Allah has given us this wealth and He's given us conditions and placed conditions upon it. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةً. And know that your possessions and your children are but a trial. And then Allah continues saying that surely with Allah is a mighty reward. Why is this important for us to understand also? That our wealth is a test for us. Just as our children are a trial for us, our wealth is a test for us. How we go about accumulating that money, and then for many of us, how we spend that money, what we do with that money. And unfortunately, we're living at a time when many of us don't really care about either. We don't care how we earn our money, what we do in the pursuit of that money, and then when we have that wealth, where we spend it, where that money is going, how it's going to places, what we're spending it on. We're living in a time where we're seeped, completely surrounded by commercialization. You see Muslims, subhanAllah, they're falling prey to this as well. You know, the funniest thing always used to be in New Year's Day, subhanAllah, the day after, when they'd have the next sales. And undoubtedly, you'd always see the queues full of Muslims. And they'll go there and they're fighting over getting a good deal. They'll fight with each other. You'll find the shopping malls full of Muslims. You just have to go, any country in the Middle East and you see the shopping malls and it's just Muslims going away, spending money without consequence. We're buying stuff that we don't need. Our cupboards, be honest, our cupboards are full of stuff that we're never going to use. And we don't see anything wrong with it. That's the problem. And that's because of our relationship with wealth. Okay, so we need to understand Islam as a whole. The Sharia is amazing. Really, I hope at some point you guys have a lecture on understanding the Sharia. And you look at the Sharia literally means something that's flowing, something that's moving, like water. And it's something which reflects the environment that it's in. But it obeys the physics that underpins it. So water, it has its nature, but it's also free, it's flowing. And that's like the Sharia. The Sharia will reflect the time that we're in, but it has its principles that it upholds. And so the Sharia, when it's applied to our time, we need to look at it. And the Sharia has both proactive measures and preventative measures. So it will intervene when it needs to, but it also takes a step back and reacts to how we are as a people. So it's both proactive, but also preventative, that it stops us from doing things. Okay? And those people who say the Sharia is something medieval, may Allah Azza wa Jal guide them, because this is something that's completely false. Kulli makan wa kulli zaman. In every time and every place, the Sharia is applicable. But it's for us to understand its principles and how they apply to us. So for example, when we spoke earlier, and I said, okay, it's the Sharia which tells us that bank accounts are haram, but it's also the Sharia that will tell us that we can use them. There's not an inconsistency, but it's understanding the Sharia, okay? So, understanding Islamic finance as a whole, there's two ways that you can do this. One is to understand all of the structures. You may have heard of things like musharaka, mudaraba, ijara, these are terms. Or we can take the understanding of mu'amalat. Now, Islam, you can say, can be split into two areas, right? One is ibadat and one is mu'amalat, two areas. The way ibadat is defined is that this is our relationship with Allah and our worship of Allah. So for something to be considered worship, it's very prescribed. In other words, everything is disallowed other than that which is allowed, right? So for example, people would have prayed Salatul Isha just now, 4 rak'ah. Can I go downstairs and do star jumps for the entirety of the time that Isha is going on and say, I've prayed my Isha? Of course not. I have to do it in a very specific way, in a specific format, saying specific things for it to be considered worship. So everything is disallowed other than that which is allowed. Mu'amalat is the opposite. Everything is allowed other than that which is disallowed. So everything is halal other than that which is haram. That's mu'amalat. And these are our social contracts, our financial contracts come under this as well. Now this is quite an important point. So to help us understand this, Islam doesn't say to us that you should prefer orange juice to apple juice, for example. Does Islam say that? Does Islam say that you should drink a certain type of drink over other drinks? No. But what it does say is that you're allowed to drink everything other than alcohol, for example, anything that intoxicates you. Does Islam say whether you should prefer mandi to biryani? No? You sure? Think about it, guys. Does Islam say that you should prefer mandi to biryani? No. Islam says you can eat what you want as long as it's not haram. Likewise, Islamically, when it comes to finance, every type of transaction is allowed other than certain things which are prohibited. And I'll cover those for you, inshallah. For us also to understand, my dear brothers and sisters, is that everything within the Sharia rolls up into meeting a higher objective, which is the maqasid of the Sharia, the purpose of the Sharia. Every ruling, you will find its root based in meeting one of these objectives, which is the preservation of your deen, preservation of your faith, preservation of your soul, preservation of your aql, your intellect, preservation of your nasl, of your offspring, and preservation of your wealth. Preservation of your wealth. And you will see how the Sharia does this in different ways. One is how we recognize wealth, mal. When we have discussions, for example, around cryptocurrency, and people talk about, is it allowed, is it permissible, is it not permissible? One of the arguments is your wealth preserved through it? What gives it its value? When we look at actually passing down your wealth, making sure it's done in an Islamic way, this is again preservation of wealth. And we're told actually not to be people who just spend money left, right, and center. This again is looking at preservation of wealth and knowing that there's a right upon that wealth. So Islam speaks to that. And there's a beautiful statement from Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, where he says, the Sharia is entirely justice, compassion, wisdom, and prosperity. Therefore, any ruling that replaces justice with injustice, mercy with cruelty, prosperity with harm, or wisdom with nonsense is a ruling that does not belong to the Sharia, even if it is claimed to be according to some interpretations. Subhanallah. This is very important. This is for us to understand when I spoke about mu'amalat, what's permissible and what makes something impermissible. So everything is allowed, every type of transaction, other than if there is riba in it, and I'll cover riba. There should be no cheating, obviously, no ghish, no one taking advantage of someone else, both obviously and unobviously. So when you hide a fault in something, this is taking advantage. When you have terms and conditions and the person that you're dealing with doesn't understand all of the terms and conditions, do you continue to sell to them? That's taking advantage of them, that's cheating. And then there's obvious ways of cheating, okay? Then gharar, which is unnatural amount of ambiguity or risk. You can't involve yourself in those transactions where either party don't know exactly what they're transacting in. There can be no gambling, right? Maysir. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran that you may find some good in this, in both alcohol and gambling, but the harm outweighs the benefit. There's risk and reward sharing. This is a really important part of it. Today, especially if you look at financial institutions and you look at how people do business, they will try and put all of the risk on the other party and protect themselves from any type of downside. Islam says no. Irrespective of how strong you are economically, based on what you put into a transaction, you will get out of it, inshallah. Risk and reward is shared based on what you put into it. It speaks to equity and justice. The underlying activity must be permissible. This is obvious. The Prophet ﷺ said that what Allah Azza wa Jalla has made haram, then the dirham from it is also haram. So it stands to sense, if we can't drink, then we can't sell alcohol. Yeah? If you're not allowed to eat haram, you can't sell haram. Okay? And the extension of this, the Prophet ﷺ told us, La darar wa la dirar. No harming, no reciprocating of harm. This is important. We can't make business from something which is harmful to society. Anything which is harmful to society, we can't profit from. And that can be different in different societies and at different times. Okay? So anything which is harmful, we can't engage in from that perspective. And this is also important because the Sharia, often you will see people when they talk about a transaction, they say, well, what's the harm in this? Because they will only judge it by their individual transaction. But the Sharia will look that if this transaction is multiplied many times throughout society, that's actually harmful for society as a whole. So the Sharia will intervene and say this transaction is impermissible. I'll give you one example of this is a mortgage. All right, and there's other reasons why it's haram, but just as an example. Because when you multiply these transactions throughout society, you will see the impact it has on society. And you will find that perversely, the reason why many people can't afford houses today is because the previous generations bought houses using credit. And if you look at the house price value, it directly correlates to credit creation and mortgages and loans. Look at it. Do the research yourself, subhanAllah. Okay? And there has to be really economic activity that Islam always speaks to value creation and exchange of value. No one is shortchanged. So normally under the transaction, there'll be either an asset or a service that is crossed over. Okay, it's just because of time, I need to speed up, inshallah. This is a big topic. Riba, let me jump to this verse, inshallah. O you who believe, beware of Allah Azza wa Jal. Give up any outstanding dues from usury if you are true believers. It's probably one of the scariest verses in the Quran. If you do not, then be warned of harb min Allahi wa rasulihi. Be warned of war with Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh said on Yawm al-Qiyamah, you'll be asked to choose your weapon. You'll be asked to choose your weapon to fight against Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah protect us from that. This isn't something that we should treat lightly, brothers and sisters. Today, we are no longer ashamed about dealing in riba. We boast about it. The number of conversations I've been party to in front, and people will say, I've just bought another house, I got a really good rate. I bought my car using this provider. We don't care. What, would anyone go around to someone else and say, I just drank 5 liters of alcohol? Oh, I just stole this thing. And Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't refer to the punishment for those people as being at war with Allah and His Messenger, as Allah refers to those who deal in riba. And we have normalized it in our society. We've allowed it to become part and parcel of who we are, even to the point that when we have a choice not to do with something with riba, we deal with riba. I can't tell you the number of questions I get on a weekly basis. Can I use PayPal credit? Can I use Klarna? I want to get a credit card. And I ask the question, do you need to? They say, no, not really. But it's 0%. Okay, but they have a clause that you pay interest. Oh, okay. Then we just accept it. And then we buy stuff that we don't need on this credit, subhanAllah. And then we're engaging that thing that Allah is at war with, subhanAllah. And it's not just Muslims, subhanAllah. And I just want to cover this hadith as well, because many people say, oh, well, I'm not charging it. The Prophet said, all are the same. Cursed is the receiver. Cursed is the payer of interest. Cursed is the one who records it and the 2 witnesses to the transaction. They are all alike in guilt. I'm sorry to say, when I speak to people who work in financial services and work in the city, they say, oh, but I don't sell interest. I'm not involved in selling any products. What do you do? I'm a lawyer. What do you do as a lawyer? Oh, I draft the contracts. Do the contracts say that you're going to charge interest? Yes, they do. This hadith is speaking to that. Oh, I work in accounting. All right. Do you calculate the interest? Yes. The Prophet ﷺ is very clear here. All are cursed. But we have somehow neatly segregated and said, okay, as long as I'm not charging it, I'm okay. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ has cursed everyone in that chain. And I can't make this easy. If you think that, subhanAllah, somehow I'll say that certain types of riba are okay, other aren't. No, brothers and sisters, start with the base position that this is something hated in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? There's certain ways in which we can recognize riba today. I know some people think that it means interest, but Islamically something is known by its reality, not its terminology. Therefore, something can be called interest and not necessarily be riba, and something doesn't have to be called interest and it can still be riba. Okay? So, how do we recognize a riba contract? Number one, if you see a money for money contract where you're giving one amount of money and you're getting a different amount of money back, this should set off an alarm bell. Could this be riba? Could this be riba? If I give you £1,000 and then you give me back £550 and you give me back something worth £500, it's a money for money contract and there's another item there, I should think, wait a second, this could be riba. The Prophet ﷺ defined riba, or the scholars, based upon the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, defined riba as any loan which brings a benefit. Any loan which brings a benefit. So I'm going to ask you guys a question now. If I lend Ibtisam here, you guys can't see him, but I can see him, £1,000, and I said to him, you have to pay me back £1,000 plus £5. Is that riba? Is that riba? That should be clear. I'm seeing a few nodding heads, but I'm not hearing clearly. Is that riba? Okay. If I said, you have to pay me back £1,000 and you can pay me back £5 if you have it at the time, is that riba? Yes. If I said to him, Ittisam, you have to pay me back £1,000 and I'm quite thirsty, can you give me a glass of water? Is that riba? No. What do you guys say? All right. If you think it's riba, put your hands up. If you don't think it's riba, put your hands up. If we define it as any loan which brings a benefit, is that a benefit that I've received? Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, he lent somebody some money and he refused to sit in the shade of a tree owned by that person because he saw it as a benefit that he received. He refused to sit in the shade of a tree owned by that person because he saw it as a benefit that he received. Any ziyada, any increase on that £1,000, whether it's money, whether it's water, whether it's a chocolate, whether it's me taking a lift from him, will be tantamount to riba. I'll give you my own example, right? And this makes me laugh because I remember I'd lent my brother some money once, my older brother. And I had to go to the airport a couple of days later. And I thought, oh, okay, how am I going to get to the airport? And then I thought, I'll ask my older brother. I've lent him some money, he can't say no. Wa'yadu billah. You see how shaitan comes? And then I stopped myself and I said, astaghfirullah. See, my intention was because I've lent him money, I was trying to take advantage of him. This can happen when people have business. If, for example, there's somebody who owns a business, say they own a coffee shop, and you've lent them some money, and you come into that coffee shop, and he sees you, and he gives you a cup of coffee, is that riba? Is that riba? It could be. Honestly, it could be, or it may not be. It all depends on whether you used to go there regularly anyway, and whether he used to give you coffee anyway. But if you do it just because you know he owes you money, and he has to, that becomes riba. So be really mindful of that. When you lend someone money, don't try and take any advantage from it. As families, unfortunately we do this. We lend someone money and then we start to apply pressure on them that they agree with everything that you do. We start to use it as a political tool. No. We shouldn't do that, subhanAllah. So any loan which brings a benefit, if you see an investment that says there's capital protection, no, that's a sign of riba. And any type of investment where you're guaranteed profit, riba. Right? Be careful of this. Now, is it just Islam that prohibits riba? No, just I'll speed this up for yourselves. In both Christianity and Judaism, riba is banned. I remember the difference is though, they don't practice it. And in Judaism, they've said that it's only forbidden amongst themselves. It's not forbidden when you're applying it to a non-Jewish person. But they've still said it's forbidden amongst themselves. I remember I was speaking at COP, and I was speaking after the Archbishop of Scotland. So the most senior kind of Scottish priest, he was speaking on stage before me at the Adam Smith Institute about finance and why it's important to have ethics and morals in our finance. And he said that, we should have morals in our finance because Jesus loves everybody, and so we should love everybody through our money, something like this, right? And then I came on stage after him and I spoke and I said, look, you've just heard the Archbishop say that Jesus loves everybody. And I said, indeed, Jesus, peace be upon him, was a loving man. He was a loving man. But in his life, he was also violent. He was actually physically violent with a group of people. Who was he violent with? Who was he violent with? You guys should know this. The money lenders. Isa alayhi salam, and they tried to paint this picture that he was only about love and peace. No. He went into the temples and he threw over the tables of the money lenders because they would lend at interest. Even Aristotle, the philosopher, said interest is fundamentally unjust because you're selling nothing for something. So we as Muslims shouldn't ever feel shy about saying interest is a cancer and a corruption on society. Even in this country, it's only in the last 100 years or so that interest has become normalized. The only place the money lenders were allowed to do their business were, excuse me for this example, but where the brothels were. Because it was seen as something disgusting and despised. But we've normalized it, we've allowed it into our homes, we allow our children to buy stuff using Klarna and all of these type of buy now, pay later schemes. We've made it so normalized. And it was something which was disgusting, subhanAllah. And some real examples. Nigeria, all that we had borrowed up to 1985 or 1986 was around $5 billion. And we have paid about $16 billion back, yet we are still being told that we owe about $28 billion. That $28 billion came about because of the injustice in the foreign creditors' interest rates. If you ask me what the worst thing in the world is, I will say it's compounded interest. That's just Nigeria. And the shame is, subhanAllah, when you look around the world, especially the Muslim world, they are crippled by debt. Every single investment bank, those who have an investment banking background, they will tell you that every investment bank has a department which looks at the economic surplus of every country. And then it's for them to find trade mechanisms that will take the surplus out of those countries. I remember when I used to work for Deutsche Bank, this was maybe 20 years ago, and I looked at some paperwork, and this was in 1979, Deutsche Bank had lent Bangladesh and Nigeria $1 million. $1 million. In 2005, right, which is when I was looking at the paperwork, both countries had paid back, how much do you think? How much had they paid for that $1 million loan? 10 million? Yeah, that's a lot of money. 10 times. What do you guys think? Both countries had paid back in excess of $25 million, and they still hadn't paid back the loan. That was one department in one bank. Now think of the IMF, now think of the World Bank, now think of the other countries. And you will see that these countries, they're so busy servicing debt that they can't invest in their own education or the healthcare of their system, of their countries. If you look at Africa today, subhanAllah, many that were former French colonies, they will say they've got independence. But part of that independence was that they still have to have their finance budgets signed off by France. And one of the conditions of their independence is that all of their money is invested in the French capital market. So what independence is this? Check it. This is a form of slavery. And that's what financial services today does. Okay, now I'll just because of time, I'm going to move on to morality and ethics very quickly. This is important, subhanAllah. People talked about compartmentalization. This is from an article. People talked about compartmentalization being a strict Christian at home, but during the day selling lucrative financial products to some guy at a small bank in Sweden who clearly doesn't understand what he's buying. The biggest compliment in the city is to call someone professional. It means you do not let emotions get in the way of your work, let alone moral beliefs. Those are for home. In most conversations, the word ethics came up only in a combination with work, referring to an almost absolute obedience to one's boss. The problem with the big banks then is not that they are immoral, they are amoral. Their employees believe that they only have one task, and that is to make as much money as possible for shareholders within the law. Now this is a problem, unfortunately, that we as Muslims have, where we've secularized our faith, that we're Muslims when it comes to our prayer, we'll pray, but we'll do business the way that we want. Let's be honest. I'm really sorry, and wallahi, it hurts me when I say this. But when somebody has some form of work that they need to do, or they need to call a tradesperson, or they need to do some sort of business, how many people think, I'm going to call a Muslim, because they're known to be really honest in the way that they work. I'm going to call a Muslim because I know that they'll do a good job and they won't cut corners. Or unfortunately, is it, let's get a non-Muslim because at least they fulfill their contracts. And this is a shame on us. How many people do we know that we talk about this person, okay, mashallah, he looks like a Muslim, but the guy is deceitful, he lies, he cheats. He'll rip you off at the first opportunity. And just to be fair, she'll rip you off at the first opportunity as well, just to be equal. It's not just brothers, unfortunately sisters as well. And that's a problem. We've separated our faith, whereas Islam, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, "Udkhulu fi silmi kafa," enter into this religion completely. We don't pick and choose. It's not, okay, I'll have this but not that. When you're a Muslim, it's not just your relationship with Allah, but your relationship with people, and they have a right upon you. And this is important. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most beloved of places to Allah are the mosques, and the most hated places to Allah are the markets. Why? Because when you're in the markets, you forget Allah Azza wa Jal. How many of us who work in financial services of some sort appreciate that we're working in the largest market in the world? And the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us to make dua before we enter the market. How many of us make dua before we start our work? That Allah protect me from doing wrong in what I do. Don't let me take anyone's right. So this is important. Very, very quickly. To understand ethics, subhanAllah. You know that there was a poll done by Kuz and Husna, who are like business academics. And they surveyed lots of different leaders and people involved in business. And they asked, there's a survey of 2,615 leaders, and they were asked, what is your most important quality? And the number one was honest and trustworthy. What was the name of the Prophet ﷺ? What was he known as? Sadiq al-Amin. Imagine that. Over 1400 years later, and that is the most important quality that's still appreciated. To be honest and trustworthy. To have integrity. How many of us can say that? And this is the problem. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that the honest businessman, he will be with the shuhada and the salihin in the hereafter. Anyone who's been involved in any form of business will know how easy it is to tell little white lies. How easy it is to take advantage of a situation. When you're in business, I'm telling you, it's very, very difficult. Sometimes you may get something wrong in an order where you're given something at a price that you know is the wrong price, but it's to your advantage, so you stay quiet. Someone overpays for something, you don't tell them. Sometimes you should have been penalized for something, but you don't get caught out, so you stay quiet. You owe somebody money. You received the goods from them, you took the goods from them, but you delay paying them. You have the money, but you don't pay your workers properly. And then we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, pay your workers before their sweat dries. But we want to grind them out. We realize all of these things in business you can do. You can pull little fast ones. So we need to understand, how do we understand values and ethics? And these are different things that feed into it. Because ethics is not neatly defined as halal and haram. It's urfi as well, it's customary. We need to look at our tradition and our culture. We look at experience and observation. There's some human intellect, and I'll give some examples to yourselves we're going to do to think about ethics. Human intellect and reasoning, and religious beliefs, of course. But a good way, I've made a list of looking at, is understanding human rights and dignity. Dignity is something, subhanAllah. When you look at the Prophet ﷺ and you look at when he's on his deathbed, in those final moments, the Prophet ﷺ said, As-salah, 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 your prayer, your prayer, your prayer. And then he said, look out for the weak ones amongst you. Protect the weak ones amongst you. These mean anyone who we are responsible for, who are answerable to us. How many times you will find that perhaps in a marriage, the husband or the father is oppressive. But you'll also find that it could be the other way around. mothers with their children. In the work context, when you have workers, you treat them like slaves, or you oppress them, or you speak rudely to them, or you're harsh to them, or you shout to them because you know that you can get away with it. How many of us have seen this? This is oppression. Because we think we can get away with it, we'll do it. So human rights and dignity, fair wealth distribution, exploitation of the weak is something we avoid, health and life preservation, social virtues and vice, our obligation to future generations. Everything we have today is about net present value. Some of you may not have heard of this term, but today's capitalism teaches you to squeeze as much as you can out today and not care about tomorrow. So you think about farming, they have intensive farming. Get as much as you can today. Maximize your value today. It doesn't matter about tomorrow. We don't care. We're not going to be around. Islam actually talks about preservation of wealth to pass down to future generations, etc. And we also think about climate and sustainability. Okay, just because of time, I just want to show a couple of slides, subhanAllah, and then I'm going to ask a couple of questions before we finish. Corruption perception. If you look at the most corrupt countries, subhanAllah, like, look at the overlay of the Muslim world. And we are supposed to be people who are honest and have integrity. Why is it that often you find that when you look at corruption indexes, the Muslim countries fare the worst? That bribery becomes a part of business, becomes a part of a normal transaction. Something that's haram is just seen as normality. This is slightly older, but we look at, subhanAllah, which was seen as the most just countries or transparent, or when it came to fair countries. And you look at the top in New Zealand, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, Singapore, Canada. And then you look at the bottom countries. Pretty much all Muslim. Pretty much all Muslim, subhanAllah. Isn't that a shame on us? And then we say, when will the help of Allah Azza wa Jal come? Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said that Allah Azza wa Jal will favor a just nation over a just non-Muslim nation over an unjust Muslim nation. As a whole, these countries are fair in terms of their systems. And we see, subhanAllah, that to get ahead in the Muslim world, you've got to pay bribes, or there's, some form of oppression going on if you're not of that nationality. This is all oppression, subhanAllah. So let's look at integrity and ethics in our tradition. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. Oh, you who believe, why do you say what you do not do? So misrepresenting, lying. The number of salespeople, subhanAllah, you look back and we're a little bit creative with the truth. No, astaghfirullah. Like, it's lying. If you're overselling something, that's not the reality, you're lying. Again, Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. Those believers are those who are faithful to their trusts and to their commitments. Again, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أُوفُوا بِالْعُقُودِ. Oh, believers, honor your contracts. This is perhaps one of the biggest ones. Brothers and sisters, we make agreements, we make contracts, and then we don't honor them. You look at Muslims when they go to work. They've agreed that they're going to turn up to work. They're supposed to be there at 9 a.m. Wallahi, like, you see them rolling in 9:30, 10. They've agreed that they're going to do 35 hours or 40 hours of work a week, but they're missing for half of them. I remember when I was working at HSBC, one of the brothers came to me, worked in IT, and he said to me, he goes, oh, Umer, please, can you go and speak to our boss? Quite a few of us can come for Jummah, and then he complains when we come back late. I said, okay. I said, what time do you leave for Jummah? He goes, oh, we leave at 12. I go, Jummah's at 1. He goes, yeah, but we want to have lunch as well. I said, okay. I said, so you take 2 hours and everyone else takes 1? He goes, yeah. I said, did you offer to your manager that you'll come an hour early or stay an hour behind afterwards so you can take the extra hour? He goes, no, why should I? But it's your contract, subhanAllah. You've agreed to this. Muslim people who are business or service people, we agree we'll do this work in a certain amount of time, but they don't do it. They don't turn up. They take time off. What contracts are we honoring? What contracts are we honoring? You agree to pay someone on time. That person has bills to pay. They can't pay their bills. They go under stress and they go under hardship. What contracts have you honored? But we've broken those contracts. And Allah's telling us, honor your contracts if you're believers. Honor your contracts. And we're easy about this, subhanAllah. Again, give in full when you measure and weigh with an even balance. This is the fairest and best indeed. How many people when they take, and I used to see people like this and they say, oh, I'm a good businessman. So they squeeze the person that they're dealing with, but when it comes to themselves, then they don't want to pay. You see this often when we go to parts of the Muslim world. I remember I was in Pakistan and the person's negotiating hard with a poor seller at the stall. This person's a poor person, you can tell they don't sell much. And they're squeezing that person. They'd go into a big mall and they wouldn't say anything and they'd pay much more than they should pay for a garment. Why are you squeezing this person? Because you think you can get away with it. Where's our justice? This isn't what Islam teaches us. When it comes to what we want, then we make sure that we get everything. I remember, subhanAllah, one person that used to work with me, I used to run a gelato shop back in the day. And it makes me laugh, yeah, I treat him like a younger brother. And he was always constantly late. He was always like 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late. Always like, I go, bro, come on, man. I go, you're always late. Try and turn up on time. He goes, oh, but Umer, it's only 5 or 10 minutes. I go, yeah, but it's never 5 or 10 minutes early, is it? It's still only 5 or 10 minutes. But you never think I'm 5 or 10 minutes early. It's only 5 or 10 minutes I'm giving him. That's not being fair. When you give in equal measure. Again, Allah tells us, woe to the defrauders, those who take full measure when they buy from people, but give less when they measure or weigh for buyers. Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when a man sells defective goods without disclosing it, he will remain in Allah's anger. Famous story of Imam Abu Hanifa again. He used to sell cloth. And he had a helper that would help him sell the cloth. And one time he was away from his store for a bit. He came back and he saw that there was a cloth that had been sold, a garment. And he asked the boy, he goes, yeah, Walid, where's the cloth? And the boy was smiling. He goes, I've sold it. And he goes, to who? He goes, I got full price for it, really happy. And Imam Abu Hanifa became really angry. He goes, tell me, who did you sell it? Who did you sell it to? And he went out chasing, shouting to find the person. And he gave him back all of his money and said, keep the cloth because there was a tear. There was a fault in the cloth. Those of us who are in business, when we sell stuff, if there's some sort of fault in it, do we even disclose it? Do we give any discount for it? Or do we feel happy that we've sold it? We've got it out the door. I used to tell you, subhanAllah, one butcher's shop I know of, and they sell meat. And they had this meat, normally it's like raw meat, but they had this meat that had all of this masala and like coating on it. They don't normally sell it. So I said to the other brother, I said, oh, wow, they started doing like flavored meat for barbecue and stuff. He goes, no, that meat's gone off slightly. So they put that coating on it to hide the smell. Halal meat. SubhanAllah. You know, these are the little ways in which we deceive people. And again, the Prophet said, whoever from you is appointed by us to a position of authority and he conceals from us a needle of something smaller than this, it would be a misappropriation and he will have to produce it on the Day of Judgment. This is the same for any form of business that we do. If you take advantage of someone, dhulm, oppression. When we think of oppression, we think of something big. But dhulm literally means to put something in its incorrect place. And we know the Prophet ﷺ told us, dhulm will be darkness on the Day of Judgment. It will be darkness for us. So we don't ever want to be someone who oppresses someone. So I'll finish with this. I know just because of time I've had to speed through it. A couple of ethical dilemmas for you guys. You have a long-serving employee in your team who's not performing well, which is holding the organization back. But the person's good, loyal, and a sincere person. You've given them many chances, including training and new roles, but they're still not up to the mark 2 years on. Your head says dismiss them, but your heart says keep them. What will you do? What should you do? Keep them. What do you guys think? Don't keep them. Brothers, what do you guys think? Huh? Dismiss them.
If he's taking somebody's life, I believe that. If it's the life of other people are involved, then I dismiss it.
To get rid of them? Yeah, see, it's not an easy answer. This is just to say that it's not an easy answer. One of the things you should look at, and I think when the person said this here, you should look at the rights of people involved. So for example, if it's your business and it's your profit, you have more autonomy in this, right? Like it's up to you if you want to, if you choose to keep them. That's your choice. That ultimately is impacting your profit. But if you have shareholders, for example, and they've invested with you, and you're impacting their profit by keeping someone who's not best for the role, then that could be seen as being unjust, right? Because you have an obligation to them as well. And if you've tried to help the person, you've given them support, it's not straight away, it's after 2 years. So you've tried to support them, then there wouldn't be any issue in you trying to help move them on. And maybe you can do it in a way that you support them and say, look, rather than 1 month's notice, I'll give you 3 months to help you. Okay? So there's different ways of looking at it. Here's one. As a humanitarian charity, you arrived in a war-torn country to deliver aid to famine-struck villages, but the ruling militia want bribery. Do you pay to access the thousands of needy or apply a zero tolerance to the bribery? What should you do?
You want what's on paper or what's behind the scenes?
Now, what do you think, as in genuinely, what do you think? Zero tolerance? But what do you guys think? Zero tolerance? More need. If you do the zero tolerance and then the people don't get the charity, is that okay? Come on, guys, what do you reckon? Should you pay the bribery? Yeah? Most people are saying yes. Yeah. What if it was zakat money that you're delivering? What if it's zakat that you're delivering? Can you still give a bribe?
You have direct benefit from the bribe.
You have direct benefit from the bribe? But zakat is paying off militia. Is it one of the acceptable categories of recipients? What's that? If you don't pay the bribe, they'll rob you anyway. Look, there isn't a clean answer, and I'm not going to say that you should or shouldn't, right? Obviously, Islamically, you shouldn't pay the bribe. This is clear. You shouldn't pay the bribe. And often, when you pay bribes, you actually make it more difficult for people to deliver aid. But when you're in a situation like this, it's very difficult. Sometimes you're seeing it, you know, and you've got to make sure that your moral compass is doing things for the right reason. And it's not easy. And that's why I said you can't see things purely as halal and haram. Sometimes you have to look at the balance of the situation. But you shouldn't pay bribes, it's haram. I would say that we shouldn't do it. But when you're in that situation, what are you going to do? You've got a truckload of aid behind you. And the only way you can get it through is if you pay this guy £50, maybe even be on a border. I reckon most people would probably slip the person £50 and take the truck through. But the point is to know that it's haram. And I said this at the beginning, know the base ruling so that at least our hearts hate this action. We live in a time where our hearts have started to accept these actions and we stop asking Allah to forgive us. Just a couple more examples. You've got two people that work for you. They do exactly the same job, right? They do exactly the same job. They've got equal experience. You pay one person more than the other. Is that just or unjust? Those who think it's, let me write. Those who think it's fair, put your hands up. Could be. Those who think it's unfair, put your hands up. Okay. Those who think it's fair, why do you think it's fair?
They may have paid the other person more because they didn't wrong the other one, the first one. I mean, they paid them enough of what is fair, and they added to the other one. That's fair, that is up to them.
Okay, so if he paid the person, the one who he paid less to, he paid them less because he knew that this person isn't somebody who complains, they're somebody who is quiet, so they can get away with it. And then the other person is somebody who shouts and stuff, so they pay them more. Is that fair or unfair? Unfair. Unfair? Say they're both equal, but one person is paid more and the other person is paid less. And they were given contracts at the same time, and it's not because he can get away with it, just he paid one more and the other less. Fair or unfair? Generally, I think we'd think it's unfair, right? It's not a trick question. Generally, we would think it's unfair. What if the one that he pays more to is married and has children and the other person is single? And so the person, he gives the first person a fair wage for what they have, but he gives the one who's married with the children more money to support him. Is that fair or unfair? Fair? It could be. The reason I'm saying this is that it's not always black and white, brothers and sisters. Something like if I just say to you, one person's getting paid more than the other, we can sometimes jump and think it's an injustice. Or we're insan, maybe we're a manager, and we know that certain people kick up a fuss more, so we pay them more, and other people we can get away with not paying them as much, and then we justify it to ourselves to say it's a better business decision. That you've got to constantly fear Allah Azza wa Jal, and despite this, subhanAllah, despite knowing all of the rules, often it comes down to behaving with taqwa. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us, الْبِرُّ حُسْنُ الْخُلُقِ وَالْإِثْمُ مَهَاكَ فِي نَفْسِكَ وَكَرِئْتَ عَنْ يَطَّلِيَ عَلَيْهِ النَّاسِ. Al-bir, righteousness, is good conduct. And wrongdoing is that which wavers in your soul and which you dislike people finding out about. So sometimes it's not about right and wrong. It's sometimes if a decision is weighing on you in your heart heavily and you aren't able to tell others about it, no, it's a wrong decision. And that's part of the nuance. I'll do 2 more questions for you, just if you don't mind, just because of the time. All right. You make an agreement with a handyman in your house. You agree a price and you agree a work. And then suddenly you start asking to do a little bit more. And then when it comes to payment, you pay him the same amount. Is that right or wrong? Are you sure? Wrong? But how many of us do this? Let's be honest. Right? You agree your contract, you fulfill the contract. If you're going to make any changes to it, make sure you agree the changes in the price before the work, not after the work, and then you commit the person, and then you say to them, well, I'm only going to pay you this much. And then the person has no choice. And then we think, yeah, I squeezed them. You didn't squeeze them. You've oppressed them. Be fair and pay him up front, or agree the price. And if he isn't willing to do it for that price, then don't do the work. But you want to get the work done and then pay him later and at the price that you want. And then the last one, all right. Okay, this is, you work with a Islamic organization, say it's a masjid or a charity, and you have to get catering for an event. There's one caterer you go to get food for regularly for your events. You have a function at home, so you go to the same caterer because you know he's going to give you a discount. Is that fair, unfair, ethical, unethical? What do you guys think? It's fair? You guys think there's anything wrong with it?
If you disclose it for home use, then it's better.
If you disclose this for home use, all right. Huh? But he knows because you give him the other business, that's why he's giving you a discount. Nothing wrong with it, yeah? What if you weren't going to go to that caterer, but you went to that caterer because you know he'll give you a discount when you buy stuff from him for yourself? Do you get the question? So, you only went to that caterer to buy stuff for the Islamic organization because you know that when you go to him for personal stuff, he gives you a discount. Yeah. That's wrong. What do you guys think? So he may out of his generosity give you his discount anyway. But you as a person in this situation, are you taking benefit from a relationship that wasn't based upon your own transaction, but it was on behalf of the masjid or charity? So this is why it's so subtle, brothers and sisters. If you have a choice between A, B, and C caterers, and you choose to go to A because he looks after you when you get stuff for yourself, instead of going to B and C may be better for the masjid or the charity, but they don't give you a discount, then have you seen how you've committed potentially an injustice? And I'm using the word injustice because you've used the charity money in a way that it shouldn't be used. Or, if you're a person of integrity, you may say to them, don't give me a discount. Save that discount that you're going to give me and apply it to the food that we get next time for the masjid. But how many people will do that? You know, unfortunately, brothers and sisters, and I say this especially to my brothers, my dear beloved brothers and sisters who work for Islamic organizations in any capacity, don't take advantage of your position. Don't take advantage of your position for personal benefit. I used to know somebody who used to work for an Islamic channel, and he would help sell them advertising for various restaurants, and then he'd always go and eat at those restaurants for free. Not good. Not good, subhanAllah. We're better than this. The Prophet's example for us was always that whenever he would negotiate a deal, he'd agree a price except that he would pay more after agreeing the price. After agreeing the price, he'd pay more. Why? Out of generosity. The Prophet ﷺ, in his life, we know everything about his life. From the way that he slept, from the way that he woke up, the way that he did wudu, the way he would eat. And nowhere in his life is it documented that he sold any item of his own. Just as a point, because he wasn't concerned with the dunya in that way. And we've made it the primary reason for everything that we do. Everything becomes a hustle. Everything becomes getting one over on that person. Everything becomes, how do we make a little bit more? And that's not how we should be. Rather, we should look at being easy on our fellow believers. We're in a transaction, be easy on them. If the person can't pay, you're the business person, be easy on them. Don't let them take advantage of you, but be easy on them. If you're the one who's buying and you go to a shop and you can see the shop hasn't done that, or they're a small shopkeeper, khalas, you're not going to get poor by paying them a little bit extra. Be easy, be generous. Be just. Be fair in your contracts. Don't take advantage of people. And inshallah, these are the things that will allow us to have barakah in what we do. And I finish with that point. Our rizq for all of us is written. And there is no creature on earth but that upon Allah is its provision. Every single one of us, Allah Azza wa Jal has underwritten our rizq. Allah Azza wa Jal huwa Razzaq. The very first thing that Allah Azza wa Jal created was the pen. And He told the pen to write. 50,000 years before creation, everything was written in Al-Lawhil Mahfuz. The fact that all of us were going to be sat here today was already written. And in that sacred preserved tablet is going to be written how much all of us will make. We're not going to get a penny more than what Allah Azza wa Jal has written us. And if we haven't received that last penny, the angel of death will not come to us until that penny comes to us. This is the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. 50,000 years before creation, everything is written in that preserved tablet. And then fast forward to the moment the soul is blown into the wombs of our mothers. And in that moment that the soul is blown into the wombs of our mothers, again it's going to be written how long our life will be, where we will die, how much we will earn. So it's already written by Allah. So my dear brothers and sisters, don't break yourselves, don't tire yourselves, don't oppress yourselves and others in seeking something in a way that's displeasing to Allah. But rather know that Allah is the one who guarantees what you have. Not the great amount of business that you can do, not your employer, but ar-razaq. The way He provided for us when we were in the wombs of our mothers, that we receive all of our provision through the umbilical cord. Everything is given to us that same way Allah continues to provide for us when we're out on this earth. But we don't see the cord. But Allah is continuing to provide for us. Everything that we have, despite our sin, despite our disobedience, Allah gives for all of us. So don't seek that money in a way that's going to be displeasing to Allah, but rather try to please Allah in everything that you do. And Allah Azza wa Jalla will not only give you that rizq, but He will make it mubarak, and He will make it blessed, and He will put barakah in it. And that barakah is the thing that you and I can change. You and I can change how much barakah we have in something. Barakah is the ability to do more with less. I've seen people who have so much money, subhanAllah. We're talking multiples of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands passing through their hands every week. But Allah has not given them the tawfiq to go for Hajj. And Allah Azza wa Jalla has not given them the tawfiq to go for Umrah. And that their families are in disarray. And you'll find someone else who has perhaps a simple life. Maybe they're a simple person, subhanAllah, who works even as a security guard or a taxi driver. But Allah has allowed them to go for Hajj. And Allah has allowed them to go for Umrah multiple times. And you'll find that they can get their children married without issues. And that they are happy. And they're content. Who is the rich one? Who is the rich one? So my dear brothers and sisters, seek barakah in what you do. Allah Azza wa Jalla will not give you more than what He's written for you. Don't try to earn it in a way that displeases Allah. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make us from the honest people of this world. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us in our wealth, in our families, to put barakah in our time, our health. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to purify our money. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect us from all forms of harm and haram. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive us for the sins that we've done financially. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to purify our wealth going forward. Wa jazakumullah wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.